I'm Dr. David Gligor. David, I don't think I need to spell that. Gligor, Gligor. And I'm the G. Brain Ryan, Endowed Chair in Logistics and Supply Chain Management at UNT. From my perspective, I would focus more on the logistics, supply chain aspects of it as it relates to inflation. And what's happening in the U.S. is not limited to U.S. We're all dealing with the same challenges as it relates to COVID worldwide. However, our challenges are a little bit different in U.S. as it relates to logistics and transportation, specifically the ports of LA and Long Beach. The problem that we're experiencing right now is that we're only operating at maybe 60 to 70% of capacity. So the ports of LA and Long Beach, those are our two largest ports in the U.S. With roughly, I would say, 40% of the containers coming into U.S. from coming to those two ports. Because of that, we currently have about 500,000 containers waiting to be unloaded, roughly 60 container ships waiting to be unloaded. And that's a problem for the economy. And of course, as a result of that, you don't have product on the shelf, or you don't have as much product on the shelf, and that causes prices to go up, and of course inflation, and of course that hurts consumers. And as I mentioned earlier, we're all dealing with the challenges all over the world, but what makes our situation unique in the US is that, again, our ports are not operating at full capacity, versus in Europe and US, the ports are open 24/7. So of course they're better positioned to deal with these challenges. And unfortunately, our consumers are currently paying the price for this. You got unions, you got multiple stakeholders essentially, and those stakeholders, of course, they all have to agree on what the hours should be. However, now we're moving into the same direction as the rest of the world because of President Biden. So it looks like we're going to be open 24/7. However, that should help, but it's not going to fix our problem. And why am I saying that? You need more than open ports to move those containers. Specifically, you need trucks. You need trucks and you need truck drivers. And we're currently experiencing probably the most challenging truck driver shortage in I would say recent history. So even if we operate at 24/7, we will still have challenges in terms of moving those containers. Once you bring those containers into the port, you have to move them out of the port, and that requires trucking companies to operate around the clock. And even if they're committed to doing that, they will struggle to find enough drivers to do that. And currently, that's a major problem. You also have operational issues. If you want to move the containers, you need more than drivers. You need a truck, but you also need chassis, and we have a shortage of that as well. We also have a shortage of warehousing space. But currently, most warehousing facilities around LA and Long Beach, they're at, I would say, roughly 98% capacity. So where will you store all those containers? So all those issues combined are making it extremely challenging. And unfortunately, us as consumers, we're paying the price for that. So when you go to, I'll give you an example. I've been shopping for a vehicle, and essentially, I had to place an order for a vehicle, and I was told that the vehicle might be in the US in the next month or so. So literally, we're all paying the price for what's happening at our ports. And unfortunately, there is no quick solution. However, I think what our president has done by deciding that we should operate on a 24-hour basis, it should help. But we can expect things to go back to normal within days, or even maybe not even weeks. It's going to take a long time to see a significant impact. And unfortunately, I think we will continue to see challenges in terms of product availability, and prices will likely continue to go up. Essentially, they're probably referring to what's going on with the port of LA and Long Beach. So essentially, that's the major bottleneck. We have 500,000 of containers that we're trying to bring into the U.S., and that's the bottleneck, the port of LA and Long Beach. So essentially, you have vessels line up for miles, and they cannot bring the containers into the U.S. You have vessels waiting for 3 to 4 weeks to be unloaded. And of course, that's hurting everybody in the supply chain, your Walmart, your Home Depot, Lowe's, everyone, because essentially you have a significant bottleneck. But we typically refer to it as one bottleneck, but the reality is you got multiple bottlenecks. So of course, the most pressing one will be the ports. And clearly we're moving in the right direction with that by operating around the clock. However, we probably are dealing with other bottlenecks as well. And I would say a major one will be the shortage of truck drivers. The trend has been there for many years. So it's not a surprise to anyone in the business. We've been dealing with challenges for many years when it comes to truck drivers. So, but some of the factors that are contributing to this would be the age of the truck drivers in the U.S. The average age for truck drivers in the U.S. is 55. So a lot of them have retired or will retire in the next 10 to 20 years. So a lot of truck drivers have retired. And of course, you have to look at the impact of COVID. As we know, COVID tends to have a more significant impact on older individuals. So it is possible that part of the problem might be health-related issues and truck drivers retiring because of medical issues or age-related reasons. So I think COVID certainly did not help the trend. Plus, there's been, when COVID initially hit, nothing. Essentially, our economy stopped. So, because of that, now we have a demand that's been building up for months, and not only that we don't have more drivers than we did before, but now we need more drivers to move more cargo. So it's a mix of factors that's caused that. And I know companies are trying to deal with that in various ways, such as trying to bring in immigrant truck drivers. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what happened recently what's been happening in the UK over the last couple of weeks. Well, their situation is pretty desperate, with people going to the gas stations and waiting for hours to get gas. And why? Because they don't have enough truck drivers to bring the fuel into UK. Because a lot of their truck drivers were immigrants from Europe, and now they're no longer allowed to work in the UK. Of course, that's not why we're experiencing this challenge. I think our challenges are mainly due to COVID. Demand goes up right before the holidays. People shopping for friends and families, buying gifts, and of course, demand typically goes up. And now, demand would normally go up because of holidays, but now it's also going up because of COVID. So you have multiple factors working against us. For example, a lot of automakers are struggling to get components to moving parts, and finished products. So because they haven't been able to sell vehicles for several months, and now there's a significant increase in demand. So you have a significant demand that's been building up because of COVID, and now you have a demand that's been building up because of Christmas. So when you combine those two, plus when you account for the challenges that we have because of COVID, with a lot of people being sick, that really creates the perfect storm. And even around the world, not just the U.S., we've had challenges with moving containers because of port workers getting COVID and getting sick. So as a result of that, containers are not moving as fast through those ports, creating bottlenecks all over the world. And again, we all know how difficult it is to really contain COVID or effectively deal with the impact of COVID. Location does matter. However, when you look at overall imports, the majority of the imports come from Asia. So they will come from the two ports in California, LA and Long Beach. So yes, we have ports in the south, we have ports on the East Coast, Port of Charleston, Savannah. However, those are mainly used for containers coming from Europe. So you might think that being in Texas might give us a slight advantage because of quicker access to other ports, but that's not the case, because still the majority of our products will come from Asia. So because of that, they will come to the ports of LA and Long Beach. So it doesn't help us much. So I would say that being in Texas does not make a significant difference in terms of access to goods coming from overseas. Assuming we can successfully contain the virus, and through vaccinations and individuals becoming immune to COVID, I would say that in the next 6 months, I would expect things to get better. However, I wouldn't expect things to get better much earlier than that, because you have too many factors working against us. Again, it's not just the ports. This will help. Of course, we'll see an improvement, and things will get slightly better. But you have to think of all the other factors that need to happen. And we can easily address those factors. It takes months. It takes months to train more truck drivers. So it really takes months to increase our capacity. And assuming that we're not going to experience a recession or even worse, so assuming customer demand will continue, which of course that's what we hope for, it will take, I would say, at least 6 months from a logistics supply chain perspective. I would say it would take at least 6 months to a year to really significantly expand our capacity. And then we might see some significant differences. And of course, from the perspective of consumers, and consumers want to, of course, they would prefer to pay lower prices. So, but I think the next 6 months to a year, it's not likely. We're not likely to see significant improvements. We might see small improvements, but I would say 6 months to a year, unless things develop in an unpredicted way as it relates to COVID. And hopefully that will not be the case. Hopefully the worst is behind us. Most consumers prior to COVID have been more or less, I would say, ignorant about supply chain and supply chain management, or what a supply chain is. But I think today all of us became aware of the importance of supply chains, because you go to Walmart and there's no toilet paper or paper towel on the shelf, and then you realize, oh, there's a supply chain. So what consumers need to know, I would say, is that we're part of a global supply chain, and that's not going away. And whatever happens in one part of the world will indirectly but significantly impact U.S. consumers. And it's very difficult to imagine that things will not continue on this path. Um, and of course, by being part of a globalized economy and having global supply chains, there's a lot of benefits associated with that. Lower cost of labor, access to resources. However, there are also significant challenges and risks that are associated with that, and all consumers need to be aware of those, um, and understand that we really depend on not when we're looking at what's going on with the ports in U.S. That's just one part of a supply chain. Our ability to have a product on the shelf also depends on what happens at the port in China or Europe, um, or the Middle East. And I think that's something that I would emphasize as a concluding thought for the readers and for consumers in general. And I think it's our responsibility as consumers to educate ourselves, to try to always understand the global economy, global issues, because those issues, although we're here in the US, those issues will impact us. For example, if we hear of a tsunami in Japan, like we had a few years ago, do know that it's just a matter of time until we will see the impact here in the US. And specifically, when you go to your local grocery store, when you go to a specific shelf to look for a product, you will see the impact, and there's no going back. So the reality is that global supply chains are extremely fragile. There are a lot of benefits associated with that, and I don't envision us going back to national supply chains or anything like that. It's just not realistic. But we have to accept the bad with the good, and unfortunately, the negative aspect of global supply chain is increased risk. And although we can do everything in our power to limit risk and eliminate bottlenecks, just like our president is doing here in the US, we have very limited control over what happens in China, Japan, Europe, and other parts of the world. So there doesn't matter what we do here in the US, there's always going to be a significant amount of risk. Even if we contain COVID in the US through vaccines and various measures, we will still very exposed to the impact of COVID because of the impact of COVID in, let's say, China or various parts of Asia.